So let's see what Cody's up to. So we found a few chunks in the oil pan, and I keep rod bearings in stock, so we're gonna do one of these. So we got the motor opened up. It's time to pull some bearing caps and see what we're looking at, if we got any bearing damage, or if we're in luck. I mean, at this point, if we take it apart, we're gonna put bearings in it anyways. But it kind of comes down to whether it's gonna be crank damage or anything worse that's gonna make it so we can't run this motor. It's kind of what we're up against. How does it look?
Not bad.
We got all the ARPs torqued, all the new bearings in place, all the silicone applied, and now the oil pan's in place. Hasn't taken us that long. What do you think since we started doing this? Like an hour?
Not even.
45 minutes?
30, 40 minutes.
Yeah. That oil pan that I took off was smashed, which is the whole reason I kind of got into this. And the pickup tube wasn't straight either, so I got to go dig another one out of my pile of parts and put it on here. But after that, we can mate the trans and get this thing ready to go in.
Yes. We do valve cover.
Oh yeah, we got to steal the valve covers. We could do that in the car though, because we still got to do timing belt stuff and all that. If we do that, why don't we just put solid buckets in it?
Yes. 9,000 RPM. Here we come.
So we got the engine all assembled, all the bearings, everything in place as far as that goes. ARP rod bolts. We just went through and resealed the valve covers. I didn't have new gaskets for it, so we just put RTV around it. Not my favorite thing to do, but it'll definitely work for what we're trying to accomplish. This is originally positioned right there, but if you look at the downpipe exhaust flow, it's going to be right in the way. So we're going to cut that and move it over there, just to give us a little bit more room for the exhaust to come through. And then this will allow us to keep the heater where we need it. This goes to one of the heater hoses. This is going to be the other heater hose that goes next to that one. So it's time to line up the twin disc clutch. You have to have a splined clutch alignment tool. You absolutely have to, because
It's 2 discs.
yeah, there's 2 discs. So if they're off just a little bit, the splines won't go through when you put the trans in, when there's all the load on the discs.
When they can be partially rotated and everything, so you can't just eyeball it.
Yeah. So that's that, all finished up. I won't tell you who welded it, but it wasn't me.
It wasn't me. That's not my name.
This turbo's sick. There we go. 63 AR, that thing's gonna spool at idle. So this clutch setup uses a T56 slave, which bolts to the adapter. And so we had to take a bunch of measurements to make sure the slave wouldn't hit the clutch discs, and to make sure that the throw on the slave cylinder would contact the clutch and give it the right amount of push and all that stuff. And according to our measurements, it all should line up. So we're gonna stab it and see if all the math is correct. So today I'm doing working on doing the trans bracket from scratch. I've done this on all my cars, but you basically start with 2 pieces of angle iron, a flat plate across. So I just drill the angle iron. That's a mistake hole right there, so ignore that. A couple pieces of angle iron going across to the stock mount, All I got left to do is put a plate on the front side. I can't point with this flashlight. Right there. Put a plate right there. Weld it together. You see the bolt coming through the middle. And then squish it together, and then this whole thing will be done. All in all, it's taken me about 20 to 30 minutes to do this. This is my preferred way to do it rather than buying a prefabbed one, because this way it's custom built to this chassis. It fits perfectly, and there's no issues that way. So things are coming along pretty well with this car. I'm hoping by tonight all the drivetrain is bolted in and done. Maybe I can get something done on the front end, get it put together. But the big challenge at this point is going to be to get the wiring done. I got a lot to do on the wiring side of things. So we'll see how that goes. So something I love about Summit Racing is that they're so close in Reno, Nevada, or Sparks, Nevada, that our stuff gets here overnight. And we pay the regular or even free shipping if it's over $100. And so basically any fittings or anything we need that we can get from Summit for $100, overnight delivery is free. It's super sick. I love it. So I ordered the turbo oil drain flange because I'd forgotten about it. So I ordered that yesterday, and the box showed up today, so I'm going to be able to finish the oil plumbing to the turbo. So, stoked on that. So, a couple things I love about this car are it still has air conditioning. Granted, I haven't got it completely set up and everything, but it's still there. The compressor, the condenser is over there somewhere. Still has all the HVAC, the heater. It's fairly OEM as far as that goes. Got the heater hoses. This camera loves focusing. So in that aspect, it's fairly OEM style. All the, well, most of the HVAC, the controls on the dash still work. Stuff like that. The ABS, no, ABS is deleted. I'm talking about the, I don't know what I'm talking about. Oh, the wheel speed sensors, the speedometer on the cluster, the fuel gauge, stuff like that. So Brody's getting the oil cooler mounted up right here. It's actually a 4AG oil cooler. I call it an oil cooler, but it's actually for power steering in this case. So it's going to go from under the headlight, which is opposite of the oil cooler. It's going to go down and attach to these two factory lines. Comes up behind this headlight, super nicely tucked, and then comes up here to where we moved this line, which is going to go down to the rack, and then this line's going to go up to the reservoir. So hopefully that eliminates my power steering problems. So we're here at Brody's shop. Well, I'm here at Brody's shop. And I had to come grab some parts that Brody had for me. We've got some 90-degree elbows that hopefully will work to weld onto my turbo. Which I talked about. I got to have a 90 coming off the turbo because a coupler would melt. And digging through his intercooler stuff, he's got a pipe that looks like it might actually fit pretty well in the spot that I need to fit it. What is this thing? This was your car, huh?
Yep.
And he sold it to Austin.
Yeah.
I love this thing. There's something about 4-door R32s. It's better than 2 doors. So this has a SR20. And that turbo's from
Evo 8.
Really?
Yeah. That's why it's reversible like that. All weird.
That's cool. What does this have for management?
Masters.
What? Sick. That's gonna be sick. What injectors?
I think they're still stock, aren't they?
Yep.
For now.
You gonna have to add fuel to it? Or you think it'll be alright with that turbo?
Do the STI 550s probably.
Oh yeah.
That'd be really easy upgrade.
So we ended up cutting part of the transmission tunnel out in order to get the transmission to sit higher. One of my big problems with this transmission swap is the transmission sits low to the ground, which causes all sorts of issues. For one, it tilts the motor back, right? So the front of the motor sits high, the back of the motor sits low. It pushes parts of the motor into the firewall, like the fuel rail fitting was touching a wiring harness, the fuel rail fitting on the back of the fuel, the back of the fuel rail. The valve covers were almost touching the firewall, all sorts of problems like that. So by getting the transmission higher, it solved a bunch of issues that I had, which I'm really happy about. I had to cut under the dashboard inside the transmission tunnel to get the transmission higher. Now I've got these open holes in there. Well, I kind of folded the sheet metal back, so now I kind of got to patch that together and find a way to get the dash braces to mount up so it'll support the dashboard again. I had to cut some of that stuff away where the main braces came down to support the dashboard. Anyways, it's got its own set of complications with that, so I've got to figure that out tomorrow. And then build the trans bracket again. I had it already built, but we raised it up about 1 inch, so we can tell just how high it is because the hole where it used to be versus the hole where it needs to be now is about 1 inch higher. So all in all, I'm really happy we did that, but it's gonna be quite a bit of extra work. Brody was able to get the oil cooler lines mounted. The power steering is completely done. You see the fancy cooler that goes to the stock lines and then goes up and around, and then there's a reservoir up there somewhere, and he mounted all that stuff. We got the turbo elbow welded in place so we can mod some intercooler piping tomorrow, get the intercooler mounted, radiator installed, all that stuff. Now that the trans is in place, the engine's not going to move out of its position anymore, so we can start fabbing the stuff that relies on that. Also, the exhaust needs to be modified, so now the engine's in place. At its proper height and position, we can mod the exhaust, do the recirc wastegate, all that stuff. So things are coming together. Today is the 10th, and we're leaving on the 18th, so we got just over a week left. So I think we're in good shape, no problem. So we got the transmission bracket rebuilt. We had to cut out the transmission tunnel, set the transmission a little bit higher in the chassis, which leveled out the entire everything, the engine, the transmission, everything, which is really cool because, I don't know if you can see it, but before we were hitting the fuel rail fitting against the firewall on this wiring harness, but on that side, of course. And with enough engine movement, it would have rubbed through the wiring harness and probably broken a few wires that would be almost impossible to fix to get down in there with the engine in place. So that's one thing that was fixed by lifting the transmission up. Another one, of course, the further back you tilt it, the higher the front of the engine comes up. And this throttle body on my previous engine was hitting the hood. And so that should be alleviated now from this problem. It does, of course, change the angle of the exhaust a little bit, which already needed to be modified because we have a 1J now instead of a 2J. And I don't know what else. Probably the oil sump pickup is designed to not be at such an extreme angle, and some things like that. So overall, it's gonna be a lot better. Oh, the shifter sits a little bit nicer too. Oh, and the transmission was the lowest point of the car. So I would, over speed bumps and stuff, the transmission would hit the road before the frame rails or the exhaust or anything else like that. So that was a problem. So I'm super stoked about all this. It was a huge pain to get the exhaust tucked up in there like that, but it was well worth it. Looking for my flashlight here so I can show you guys what we had to cut on the trans tunnel. Alright, there you go. You see, I had to cut the dashboard out up there, and to gain access to the trans tunnel, had to remove that bracket and then cut a slot. Well, not a slot, that's a square. Had to cut a giant square out of the trans tunnel. So now I'm going to weld it back together as best I can, and anything that doesn't seal, I'm just going to put some aluminum foil tape over it, which is basically what I did when I cut the trans tunnel up in my FD car for the dog box. That car's cut up pretty good, and I just used I used metal plates, and then anywhere the plates wouldn't seal perfectly, I just used a bunch of aluminum foil tape to because it's actually really adhesive. It's a good tape for stuff like that. I believe it's HVAC tape. But anyways, that's what I'll end up doing in this thing, because this is gonna be a street car, so I don't want exhaust fumes leaking in. I don't want cold air leaking in, or excess noise. So I'm gonna try and cover that up as best I can. So I want to show you guys the power steering setup here. One of the things that changed is the height of the reservoir. The reservoir used to be right here, and so the pickup that goes to the pump was at a different angle, and it was a lot lower. Now the reservoir is definitely higher than the pump. The pickup goes downhill. And in addition to that, we've added the power steering cooler, which I've already showed you a few times. Loops back around and comes back into the reservoir. And there's an inline filter that we already had, power steering filter, to trap anything that might be in the system. And so I really hope that this solves any problems that we had before. If that doesn't solve the problem, then what I'll have to do, I don't know what I'll have to do. Probably electric power steering. I kind of wanted to avoid that because usually Toyota pumps work really well with Toyota chassis. So hopefully things work out well.
Hey guys, my name is Joe. I will be doing this Drift Week adventure with Brandon. I'm editing this video right now because Brandon is still a bit busy with the car. And thank you so much for watching. You're gonna see this face a lot more from now on. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Follow Brandon on Instagram. Follow me if you want, Joe. I will put my, my tag somewhere. Anyway, keep an eye on us. This trip will be epic. See you next time.